data value. Now, the theme about unlocking data value is about creating harmony from ever-growing data sources. I'm sure everybody understands how difficult it is to actually normalize and coordinate and orchestrate different data sources. But I would like to hear it from different companies. So today we have invited 5 experts on the panel, and I'd like to introduce them now. First, we have Varun Verma, APAC Head of Data and Analytics from the HEINEKEN Company. Next, we have Faiezy Hasnan, Head of Data Analytics at Etiqa Insurance, joined by Garrett Teoh, Head of Artificial Intelligence from SN Money. Korey Lee, Vice President of Data from SCMP, is also joining us. And last but not least, we have Dr. Yuhui Yao, Group Vice President and Group Head of Data at FWD or FWD Insurance. Hi, guys. Thank you for joining.
Hi. Good afternoon.
Yes.
Thanks a lot, Winston. Thanks a lot for having us. I'm really looking forward for the conversation with these experts around.
Sure. And I'm looking forward to the insights as well. So morning, afternoon, I remember we all are at different time zones. That's one of the issues. Continuing from the first panel discussion, people were talking about data infrastructure and having a strong data platform that integrates different data sources. And I'm just wanting your opinion, just as a start out. Maybe Garrett, you can start out. How important is to have a data platform?
Right. Okay. So, the answer to this question is that let me start off by, having one scenario that we currently have or are facing. So, right now, with SN Money, right, we create like a BI or the dashboards across to different levels, like from the management level to the middle management to the ground level employees, right? So we really need to define, what are the kind of the metrics or the key KPIs that are necessary for the top management, and as well as in terms of the middle management, more concerned with the daily operations, and for the ground level, people, they are more concerned with the detailed transactional level. So for us to deliver this kind of the insights or the BI across to the different teams, as well as with SN Money, right, we are also operating in different country regions as well. So we need to amalgamate this data from different countries and standardize them across to this to the management. So it is a challenge if we do not have a data platform that standardize all these data definitions and trying to put that into a format that the upper management will understand. So having a data platform that can automatically extract this data from the raw source of a database to put them into a standard definition in terms of revenue or operational cost. It is really important, because if we have different definition across different countries, then of course these metrics will not add up to the standard one that we are reporting. So it is very important to have a data platform.
Korey, from your perspective, right, you're coming from the news organization. What does building a data platform really means, and what are the issues that you face in terms of integrating different data sources?
Sure. So we've built several data platforms, or I guess one main data platform with several different users. And one of the challenges is meeting the different business needs across the organization. So we not only have to build a platform for editorial, for a newsroom, but also we want to build a platform for our marketing teams, for advertising teams, for our product teams, so they can understand what's happening with our customers, right? How are readers actually engaging with our UI, UX? So serving multiple different business needs across the organization requires us to not only track different metrics, but also be able to aggregate these metrics from different platforms. So we've built, to my count, I think off the top of my head, 40 to 50 different integrations so far, API integrations ranging from social media to email to tracking traffic, downstream to conversion, and really understanding what the user journey is across the entire data stack, and then making sure that each department has access to the data they need. So I think that's a huge challenge, and it requires a lot of conversations with each business unit to understand what their needs are, and making sure that whatever we build meets their needs on a day-to-day basis.
As the person who is the head honcho for data, how difficult is those conversations?
Sometimes they can be quite difficult. Sometimes it requires a bit of convincing. Something that I found works quite well is making sure that we create value for that business unit. So it's, you know, sitting down with our head of technology, or maybe someone who's working on a marketing campaign on a day-to-day basis, and talking to them about what value can data add for you, right? How can I make your campaign better? How can, you know, what KPIs do you actually care about, and how can my data team help you with that? So if we can create value for them and they understand what's in it for them, to be able to make their life easier, their campaigns more efficient, their dollars spent more effective, then they're all for it, right? For editorial, it's growing traffic. For marketing, it's making campaigns more efficient. So it differs a little bit for each department, but figuring out what that is that adds value for them, I think, is key.
But I guess once people see the value, then it's a lot more easier conversation. I'll move to Varun. Varun, Heineken is actually slightly changing their model. I mean, they are also now interacting much more closer with their end users, we would say, or end customers. I'm just wondering, how does that actually work with making sure that you have the right data platform that brings in all the different data sources?
Yeah, so I think you rightly pointed out, Heineken has been now approaching our consumers and customers more than ever. And, you know, we are collecting vast majority of data points, which are part of our value chain, business value chain. And it is very essential for us to do this right, because, I mean, the moment we start fragmenting and scattering our data, then it becomes another challenge and it becomes another project in order to harmonize it. So instead of, let's say, having those repetitive work, we would also want to do it at one go. But these days, what's happening is that the business or the businesses, they have been evolving rapidly. I mean, you can see during the COVID times what happened, like e-commerce grew like 400%, 500%, and then entire focus shift to e-commerce as a channel for route to consumer. So, you know, such challenges which are there. So you need to work in that ever evolving space. You need to understand that the data platform that we build is something which is easily customizable, and it is accommodative enough for the new data streams and data sources that we are creating. So if you go back in a traditional world, what essentially we had was more of a supply chain, and then on the front side, we have about, you know, more on the sales order information. But now I think with this rapid expansion, what is happening, we have our B2B platforms that connects between distributors and outlets. We have our own B2C platforms, which connects Heineken directly to consumers. And then we have, you know, indirect business to consumers, such as Lazada, Redmart, and so on. And what is happening today is, so one is the ecosystem that we manage, and then we are also responsible for getting insights from the ecosystem that are managed by our partners. So it is very important and essential to understand that what are those, you know, right integration strategy when we talk about, you know, getting the data sources and data streams from our partners, and then making sure that we create a collective ecosystem of our data, which will enable us to drive more deepened insights with our customers and consumers. And that's the challenge that we currently, you know, face, because there are several data sources, you know, in any FMCG company. You know, the FMCG companies go and then do execution, they do sales ordering, they do customer service, they also do supply chain, and all these data sources are sort of disintegrated. And to collect them and provide a unified platform which can consolidate all of them together, it's something which is a huge challenge. And you know, what we are trying to accomplish as of today is to understand that, okay, what are those key areas that we would like to first focus on, and then try to consolidate our information together for those data streams, so that we should be able to build and supply the critical insights from that data sources, which are driving more day-to-day decisions and more strategic decisions. Second, what we are also trying to achieve is, how we can start harmonizing our data and our data platforms in a manner so that it can support what is coming, let's say, after 3 years. So we need to be little visionary in this sense to understand and then keep talking that how our business is going to evolve in future, so that we could talk about these different data sources and make our platform so lean that, I mean, it can actually take any data integration in any form. You have like structured data, tomorrow we will also have unstructured data. We are already receiving it in some form. So we need to make sure that our platform is accustomed to take and able to make those changes in future. Yeah. So that's what our strategy is so far.
That's good. Dr. Yao, I'd like to bring you in here. What about from the insurance industry? Because it is getting to be interesting, because you're now reaching out to wearables. Now the policies are now being aligned with wearables, and people are getting more aware about their own health, and obviously whether they are insured or not. But how are you actually integrating all these data sources?
Yeah, I think I think Lawrence and also you also mentioned it depends the company strategies, right? And I think it's similar as most of the speaker here. So our position about the group data platform is operational, analytic, and single source of truth. So that's why the data platform is very critical. Operational means there are more and more data API and the real-time capability. Whatever data streaming and also the clean the data and provide single source of truth is getting more important. Secondly, now AI is a future trend, right? And also we are doing that. So that's why you need to put all the data and then enable the data scientists to analyze the data, then identify the pattern for that. Then thirdly, single source. I think you also mentioned this is easy to talk, but it's very hard to achieve, right? We need to integrate the data from different sources to really form a single customer view. But this is just one example to answer you in terms of how to serve the customer better. To build a single customer is very challenges, right? Because today the data sitting in different organizations can be online, right? Can be apps, can be in the policy system, can be claim, can be engagement, a lot, and can be customer portal. To have a single view of a customer, to understand the customer more from a holistic view, right? We need to build a single customer view. And definitely this one is just not one-time job, is a journey, right? That's why you need to, based on use case, right? Then we can purposely to connect data from different sources, then orchestrate together. A lot of things to be done, like in terms of customer identification. One customer have different identity, emails, and your national ID. I need to leverage the tool to identify them and really the formless in single customer identification. Then try to enrich the customer file. Then enables whether for the marketing have a deep understanding about customer to run more personal campaign, or able the data scientist to do more analysis to see what's next best what's next action for that. So all these kind of things definitely we need to leverage the data platform to consolidate the data from the different customer. And we able us to move into a more customer-led company. Yeah.
Thank you. And Faiezy, good that you joined back. I know you had some trouble, but I just wanted to highlight what Dr. Yao was talking about, single source of truth. From your perspective, how do you create a single source of truth that works for the organization without introducing bias? And I think I will use that question for others later on. But from your perspective, Faiezy.
Yeah, I think if you talk about single version of truth for us, Etiqa, there's three main perspective of a single version of truth. One is the data itself. For example, if you want to know what's the claims loss ratio or the earned premium or persistency of a certain division, then you need to go to one source, one version of that calculations. Yeah? That's one. And number two is what Dr. Yao highlighted about customer. That's from the perspective of entities. Customer, there should only be one customer. If there is an agent, there should only be one agent. One data being shared across multiple systems and users. And number three, look at it from the perspective of language. If I say this is the accident year loss ratio, taking from the perspective of an insurance company, it has to mean the same thing across multiple people, and this is a commune issues, not a data or technology issue. So the third point, which is about language, that relates to change management, education, awareness. So it goes beyond technology, beyond data. It's also about the people and the community themselves.
Okay. Thanks. And I'll bring Korey, from your perspective, you mentioned that it's all about having those conversations, which can be very difficult. But looking at it from a technology point of view, what are the challenges? What are the gaps that you face as a data head to actually bring the data all together?
There's so many. I don't know where to start. I think. Sorry. What did you say?
The top three that comes to your mind.
Sure. I think the first thing that's not talked about often because it's not particularly sexy is just cleaning the data. It requires quite a bit of work to actually structure data, clean data, and make sure it's in the format where, like Yao said, the data scientist, the analyst can actually use it. So I think that's a data engineering task. It's often very tedious, it's very painful, and it can take a long time. And it's an ongoing maintenance task that needs to happen. So you need to continually have clean data to be able to use. And that's something that I think we don't talk about a lot, but should have a degree of emphasis and importance. It's not sexy, it's kind of brutal, mind-numbing work sometimes, but it is critical to having good output, to having good analysis, to having good insights, and ultimately good recommendations for the business to action on. The second thing that I would highlight is organizational transparency. So I think once the data is available and it is accessible to different departments across an entire organization, it needs to be, people need to understand what it is, and it needs to be made, people have to be able to access it, right? In some senses in some cases that's dashboards. In other cases, teams that are a little bit more technically savvy, our product and our technology teams have, engineers and, technologists within them, so they can actually write their own queries. So we might give them access either directly to our database or build tools on top of it for our business teams that have, a certain curiosity where they can kind of drag and drop the pieces that they want. So if they want to understand how many users came from Singapore through Facebook yesterday, they can actually get that data. We built another layer on top of our SQL database that enables them to actually query that with just business logic, no code necessary. So really enabling transparency to the data is probably the second piece, in addition to having clean data. And I think the third one is just really finding good people, finding talent, data talent to be able to dig into those insights, to make recommendations to the business, both in the analyst context, in data science, and in data engineering. So I see kind of data as those three disciplines. I think those three things are the things that I would highlight that are critical to really driving data as a culture within an organization.
Varun, clean data, it always comes out with any discussion about data or data ops or data engineering. Why are we still talking about how difficult it is to clean data after a decade of data ops best practices?
Yeah, it's a difficult question to answer. I mean, and I think the point that you raised is very valid, that after maturing so much in data analytics, we are still talking about data cleansing. And possibly, I think I agree with Korey here. So it's not very sexy work, number one. And the amount of effort that you put in the data cleansing, you are unable to show the value that you create by that cleansing effort, right? So there is no direct connection. So people actually, when you talk about the business functions which are using data, they focus more on the insights and the recommendations and solutions that they can develop on. Nobody talks about that how much amount of effort does it take to clean different data streams. I think one of the challenges that I see, why is it still happening after after even getting matured so much in data analytics field, is the tools or the technologies, number one, which are there in the market today. Although, I mean, they have matured in the last decade massively, but still I believe that there should be some deficit that they can still sort of address in terms of doing this data preparation task. All these technologies which are maybe, I think, on the data integration side or data virtualization side, or maybe you can call it on the reporting and dashboarding side, they're trying to sort of bridge and accelerate the work with a lot of different predefined use cases in which you could actually able to do the data cleansing work quicker than the past. But we still have, I think, huge gaps. So that's number one. So we need to definitely focus on the technology that should accelerate this amount of work, because a lot of these different data models are now becoming standardized, and as they are becoming standardized, that the companies know how to sort of do this work. I think that is something which is in their roadmap as well. If you talk about the product planning for them, they are trying to do it like based on different industries, but that's like one thing which is there. Number second is the transactional data sources which are there, and especially when I talk about Heineken, I don't know, I mean, for the other companies, the newer organizations which are set up, let's say after 2000, they were able to establish their data sources in a manner in which they would want to collect the data. But like companies like us, which were, let's say, coming from a slight bit of heritage, and then there are lots of merger and acquisitions that also happened in these industries. So what is happening, we have very fragmented data sources, and then we also have transactional systems that are not sort of designed with the vision to get insights later on. I mean, they were like designed in a very different manner, and then every system is very different. So what's happening there is, in order to simplify, organize, and uniform all those different data sources, it requires vast amount of effort again to clean the data, because the transactional systems are something which are not, again, providing the right degree of quality. So that's another thing. So it's a back and forth discussion, which also requires, which is another third part of it, which requires a little bit of effort from, let's say, the people who are managing data to the people who are sort of managing these transactional system, that how do these two functions talk together and find out that, what, if we are using, let's say, this particular data element in a certain shape and form, why don't we have that directly in the transactional system? Why do we need to have this all transformation in somewhere in the between, in the ETL? So those are the conversations, I think, which is still not yet taking place, because again, it's that undefined territory, who should take the lead in order to do that, because no one knows, and then it requires a immense amount of collaboration and then transparency to find out that, okay, how do we make sure that the garbage in and garbage out types of situations doesn't happen. If we have, let's say, the data preparation which is taking huge amount of time, how can we reduce that and then possibly accelerate data collection to insights development? So these are the three things that I could potentially identify in at least my business scenario.
Thanks. Dr. Yao, I'd like to hear your perspective of this on how to prepare data sources, especially when you have different types of data sources, maybe some not for data analytics or not ready for data analytics.
I think there are two kinds of data source preparation. One is I just looking more from an operational and perspective, right? That is more use case driven, because there are so many use data source across organization. To console at 100% is not practical, and every day have new system, new data points. So I think most of the point is really to come up with a strategy and roadmap, and along the roadmap you identify some of the key use case. And you just consult those data first to really to show the value, right? At least there's some small step, at least continue to demonstrate the value, as previous speaker said, we need to add value to the business side. And that really can help us to move the business the more as we cannot be a big waterfall approach, right? Big elephants, by end of the day, the usage is very low and so forth. I think this is very important. Another data preparation is more from the analytic perspective, right? To allow the data scientists try to explore the data from the different sources and try to identify some patterns, right? Then come up with whatever the customer understanding, some insights, or could be fraud detection, other things. So this can be done offline, right? Just provide a sandbox environment, right? Just dump the data, then just the data science will figure out how to link the data together, do some analysis. Maybe for five analysis, end of the 2 or 3 is meaningful, right? And for that 2 or 3, then move for analytics to be operational. Then look on the data source, how we can get the operational data source, then really form whatever the AI engine or report, whatever, then really to deliver the value in a more scale way. So that's two kind of data preparation we're doing today in our organizations. Yeah.
Is it important to get a domain expert sitting next to you to actually go through this interpretation of this data, or being part of your team?
Yeah, definitely. This is the different stage, right? For example, during the data injection, the data mapping is very critical. So I typically want to do standardization, right, to form a single source of truth. So the domain expert from the IT side, from the business side, is very important. They can provide you different perspective, right? Then then we can come up with the data mapping, the methodologies and all the definitions. So that is one thing is very critical to have the domain knowledge. Second, that when you do analysis, whatever agile, whatever form a project team, we need to invite people from IT and business side also to help the data science understand. So what's the business knowledge, what's the business experience, and how to translate that into the data point into the system. So also we need that domain knowledge to together, right? Then last but not least, once you finish the analysis, the business are also happy to validate on that. Then the IT side happy to implement that from the operation. So along the way, I think it is a joint effort. We need to domain expert from different organizations. Typically, the business side and the IT side work together and really help us to deliver something more meaningful and more effective.
Thanks. Faiezy, I'm going to ask the same similar questions and on actually putting a domain expert, the importance of having a domain expert. But I'd like to hark back to a conversation that I had with the data science team. They understand the value of having a domain expert as part of the team, but the domain expert may not have the time to actually work with the data science team to come with the right interpretation. So how do you create a collaboration that is a win-win situation so that it does not impinge on each other's time, but it all goes back to making sure that the interpretation is correct?
Yeah, I think as with any consensus relationship, what you need to do is that you need to start early. You need to have the conversation often. And I think as a data science team, it's very important for you to not just have a project by project discussions with other business units, but also have a schedule, either a yearly or quarterly discussions or interview with other business users and try to understand what are the challenges, what is it that they want to achieve for the next 2-3 years. Because what I've seen work in the past is like, for example, working with life underwriting. I happen to be a motor insurance pricing actuary coming into Etiqa, but we have done some work for life insurance side, and it was because we start early. We hear what's their goal, what is it that they aspire to achieve, and on our side we do some research on our side. What is it that the industries are doing in this aspect, and how is it that we can add value going forward? And that's where the understanding of we have to understand a little bit what they are doing, so that you can start to have conversations at a more level playing field, and get that agreement that, okay, this is probably what we want to do in the future. Let's start a project together. Let's see how it goes in the next 5 spring. What happened there? Yeah.
Great. I'm going to go to Garrett in terms of a topic that came out through this discussion as well as the earlier discussion, which is automation. But before I go into that, I would like to invite everyone who are audience. If you have any questions, I mean, we have 5 experts down here. Please do send in the questions, and we will look to answer as much as possible and be interactive. Now, over to you, Garrett. People talk about automation. There's a lot of claims that you have automated tools that can make your life easy. I'm sure a lot of you will nod your head and probably smile at that claim. But is automation, especially in your field, which is auto ML and maybe auto feature engineering, are those a double-edged sword?
Yeah, okay. So it's very funny because when asked about automation, right? So I once posted this case to the management whereby, if you want to have the insights that are scalable, as well as with agility, with speed, if you want to know the numbers, what is my total number of present value for this market with this set of service, I want it when I ask this question, I want it in 1 minute or 2 minutes. They say yes, they would like to have that kind of insights. I say, great. So if you want to have this kind of insights in 1 to 2 minutes, which means that you need to have an automated platform that allows us to extract the data automatically from the raw source, ingest it into the model, to run the standard modeling, and then to be able to, predict and to give you the insights that you need in 1 to 2 minutes. And they say, yes, that's perfectly, you know, what we want. And can you do it? I say, yes, but it comes with a price. Like, you know, what would be the price? Like, you know, I asked them, what would be the price that you want to pay for getting these insights in 1 to 2 minutes, right? So when I, like, you know, set up, like, try to explore with the vendors and to do, you know, exploration with the consultants, and this is like the final price or the check bill that you have to pay, they say, wow, okay, let me think about it again. Yeah. So, but, you know, the most important thing about doing the automation, you know, that's, you know, this is to, you know, to validate the ideas that this is what the management wants. So they might be like, you know, asking, for example, the question that they asked that, you know, what it will be the total present value for this market at this moment. But the next day, they might change their strategy again. They will change their strategy and say that, okay, I want to know what is the most interesting products that the customer wants, you know, for the next 30 days, right? So for that, I will need to, you know, go back to the system and ask the data scientist that, can we do this, like, you know, set this up in, you know, probably the next week or only over the weekend. So if we have, like, you know, an automated system, right? The automated system, I believe that nowadays there are many tools out there, you know, on the cloud or, you know, on-prem that provides the solution to automate the data science machine learning models. But however, you know, so that comes with another perspective, that the person who is using these tools needs to be trained to use these tools, right? So there are, you know, 100 thousands of tools out there that can do automation, but the data scientist needs to understand that, you know, how do I use these tools to automate my, to run my model, you know, with the right prediction. And setting this up, you know, is no joke. So setting this up is, you know, you need to experiment with the data first. Like, you need to experiment first, you know, collect the data that can predict, you know, what kind of services will be the most relevant for the next 30 days. And once you identify, you know, the right data, build the right model with a certain, like, a testing of the model's performance to the satisfactory level, then you need to productionalize it. So once you productionalize it, then you are able to, you know, present this to the management. So quite often, you know, when we, you know, at the stage of trying to validate this, you know, the management, they got bored and, you know, they wanted something else, right? So I think getting automation, you know, is like a moonshot, right, to get things done. But however, you know, with more testings, you know, with more experimentation and having the right tools that, you know, your team knows how to use it, will be very key and important. Yeah.
Korey, is it the same opinion? Do you have the same viewpoint in terms of how automation is? Double-edged sword, need to be very careful?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's something that we all desire, right? We have limited resources. We need to scale our teams. However, we also need to make sure that those automations are accurate, and, you know, that the data that's going out to these teams is of high quality. So I think that's something that requires internal audit. I mean, you're getting kind of into data governance a little bit, but, you know, we need to make sure that, you know, revisiting and maintaining these data sources, these ETL pipelines, and the ultimate end product that gets into the hands of our business partners is really important to maintain that sense of data integrity, and also trust within the organization, in the data team, and in the data that they're using to action for whatever business purpose.
So if I get it right, data governance comes first before we even talk about data automation, or maybe automating some of the processes. Is that correct?
Yeah, so again, data governance is, I will view this as a double-edged sword as well. And, you know, probably that work for some business, that might not work for some business. So data governance, you know, the reason why it is important, you know, in my opinion, is that because, you know, for the regulations, right, for compliatory purposes, right? So especially with the PDPA Act, right, that, you know, we need to protect our data to make sure that the data that the data scientists work on will not get leaked or get hacked by external parties, right? So, which is why data governance comes into play, and, you know, to make sure that only the data scientists get access to customers' information that are relevant for building the prediction models, or, you know, building these insights, right? And, you know, they might think that, you know, the data governance team might think that, okay, so customers' very personal information like ID, probably age, is not necessary or required to build the predictive model. So, they restrict the access to the data scientists. But sometimes, the data scientists will argue that, I need the age to infer, the birth date, the birth year, and then, so that we can get the right segmentation of the customers. So I think data governance, right, could be a double-edged sword for companies who, matters a lot on the PDPA and getting in compliance with the regulators, right? But for some other companies whereby, it's not that strict. So data governance actually provides sort of like a roadblocker to data scientists who wants to experiment with data. So as a data scientist, right, I always, told my stakeholders that, if you give me the data, then we can produce something. If you don't give us data, no talk, right? In our currency is in the data. So if we get blocked by the data governance team, then, things are not going to move. And, especially when the whole process of getting the access granted to the data takes 1 week between the emails, then someone will be jumping and say, have you not got the data yet? So I think, but however, data governance is necessary for some of the companies that have a very strict control on the PDPA. Yeah.
Dr. Yao, so in your insurance industry, obviously governance is an issue. And I'm just wondering, governance at that level used to be about data governance, but now compliance is also getting into the game. So how are you actually working with them and not becoming a roadblock to your data activities?
Yeah, so...
Okay, sorry.
Dr. Yao, go first, then I'll come back to you, Garrett.
Okay, thank you. I go first. To me, I'm quite open. I position data governance is complementary to the data and scientists or maybe data management. And why is that? Because data governance is not only just focused on compliance. There are also other pillars which can support the data science. For example, data quality management, right? Data lineage, right? Data security, all these kind of things. Then typically we have for insurance, we have regular industries, right? We have to able data scientists to do analytics in a more safe, secured, and compliant way is very important. That's why we are very open mindset to work with compliance. I also in charge data governance also. We talk to, so the compliance side, risk side, they come up policies, right? Based on different country have different PDPA requirement. So then they design the policy. Then based on policy, we come out in terms of the strategy, in terms of the process, in terms of tool implementation. Then we ask the data management to build this environment. So that end up they really able data scientists to do this in a more professional way. So to me, I think the data governance is very necessary and also is complementary. So I think typically to protect our customer interests, right? In the future, now people are more worried about the data privacy protections, right? So as a customer-led company, we have to think from the customer shoes perspective, right? How to protect data. Then we have to look at, yeah, sometimes data science may complain, right? But we have to do the right things, right? And to sit in the customer shoes to get necessary consensus. Then we can do the data properly. So this is my view about data governance for our organizations.
Garrett, you wanted to have a view?
Yeah, so for the compliance, for the sake of compliance, I think it is also equally important, for some of the businesses. So over here, in our company that, if we want to collect the customer's information to, let's say, for example, help us with doing credit assessment for certain financial products. And there could be an area that we are collecting too much personal information and it might not be in compliance with the specific country regulatory rules. So we need to really seek the domain experts in compliance. So compliance, it really involves those who are in the legal industries to sit down together with the data scientists to find that perfect balance or the sweet spot at how much data should we collect from the user, personal information from the user, without encroaching into their personal confidential information, while ensuring that, we are building this a very accurate credit assessment models to, for us to, provide these loans to the customers. So again, to find that sweet spots, really, it takes the domains experts between the data scientists and the legal experts to sit down together to find where that sweet spot is. Yeah.
Korey, do you get the sweet spot? Because you're actually working with personal data as well, because with subscribers.
Yes, there is that as well. I think it's there's a balance, right? In the news business, I think it is a bit different. We do have PII in terms of subscriber data, but they've also given their express consent. So I think that's very helpful because it's very explicit. In another business like e-commerce, those customers have also given consent, but there's also a lot richer data on those users. In the news business, it's a bit different because a lot of our users are anonymous, right? If they're not logged in and you come and browse, the nature of that data is very different, and it's actually much more difficult, much messier to deal with because you're dealing with cookie data rather than self-declared or logged in data. So I think just the nature of the data is different. Of course, we would love to have more subscribers, more logged in customers, but that's always kind of a back and forth kind of debate with how much do we make the user experience seamless and anybody can kind of come in and out and read the news. Of course, we want to make it universally accessible. We are a service based platform, but at the same time, of course, we want to build our user loyalty and really focus on how to grow our subscriber base. So I think those two things, balancing reach and revenue, can always be a bit of a tension.
Varun, your company is actually moving towards having a B2C model as well. So now you're going to be dealing with privacy, data privacy, and data sovereignty, all those kind of issues. How are you actually preparing? Because you are moving into that direction. So you have the advantage of starting from scratch.
So it's not starting from scratch. Heineken has been actually collecting data from very, very long time. It's just that there are now more avenues, and the velocity of collection of this data has gone up. That's something which I can say. So there are two things. One is, since Heineken is a European organization from the origin, so we need to follow GDPR. In Europe, we do it. It's basically, there are no compromises on that. You need to follow that. Now, in Asia Pacific, we are still, trying to identify that, okay, which data protection act do we need to follow when we collect, let's say, information. Although we don't have the financial information for our consumers, it's more about their, personal interest, shopping behavior, and some of their, let's say, events and special ceremonies and those types of data elements that we collect. But in these data landscape also, you need to be very, very cautious in order to let's say, build your models on that and then provide any sort of personalization, customization, and then need to make sure that you do proper protection of your consumer information. We have, let's say, different business entities within Asia Pacific, which is collecting a lot more information than any other FMCG companies collect. This is like, through POS systems. So we also have POS systems actually. So where we also identify that, okay, what are the other products that actually our consumers are buying. Yeah. So those are the types of the things which exist in our markets. And then we need to ensure that we first follow the GDPR policies. And then additionally, we need to also follow the protection policies, which are, let's say, established by Singapore government or any other market where we work on. So Australia has a different policy framework, which is pretty inspired, influenced by the GDPR. Moreover, they fall in the same category. But yeah, of course, we need to get into the conversation to understand that, okay, what are those relevant policies? So what we do, we work very, very closely with our legal team and compliance team, and they let us know that, okay, what are the norms and what are the baseline things that we need to ensure that we should do with our consumer data, so that we do not fall in any sort of those breaches or unsolicited usage of data. So all of those types of things that we need to do. By the way, I also wanted to cover, on the previous question, so about having this sweet spot. When we talk about the data governance, you could actually, it's a slicer. So basically, you could go very defensive approach to very aggressive approach. And this is something which is true for us as well. The more aggressive you go, you start deteriorating the amount of innovation that you can do with your data. And the more defensive you go, there is always that flexibility, and then people do whatever they want, and then you sometimes breach it. So there is no sweet spot. And even to be honest, when we talk about compliance and the legal teams that are driving these conversation on the Data Protection Act, they have never done that. Yeah, these are some new things for them. They are also learning through this process. There are few experts which are sitting actually in different financial institutions and possibly with governments who are driving these regulations, but they are also learning through the process. They don't know. And when it cascades down to companies like, any of the financial services or possibly us, the legal department is also something which is, they try to seek for help that, okay, what should be the right compliance level? Because their focus is something that, okay, we need to, of course, protect our data, but they do not know how much of how much of the innovation that they are sort of downsizing with that protection. And possibly you need to go with their advice, because of course they are the custodian of the protection and then the legal compliance and so on and so forth. But at the same time, I have seen, people are not generally very, very sure when they talk about these things. They are possibly learning from several frameworks, but there is no uniform framework that can guide any of the legal person that, okay, what should be that act. GDPR is something which is, to be honest, at a high level, this is something which is very, very precise, where you could actually have different steps. But when you talk about, let's say, in other markets, the PDPA is something which is loosely defined. And then when it cascades down to companies and the legal teams, they make their own version of it. So it's challenging to find that sweet spot, to be honest.
Faiezy, challenging for your organization as well?
I think what Varun said about PDPA is loosely defined. I think it's perhaps correct. Like if you try to read the wordings of PDPA, it's actually quite liberating to read that. You collect the data that you need. So that's basically defined, like how much you can collect, and then you keep the data in terms of life cycle only for the to the point that you need the data set. But after which you probably need to either soft delete or archive it or throw it away. So as a data scientist or data analyst, you have the liberty to highlight that this is what I need. And hence, that can help the legal team to then define it in a way that is friendlier to your side. So, because compliance is a compliance, you have to follow, but it is reasonably, there's sufficient room for you to play and still allow you to do your job. Yeah? I think the question is about the process. And if I want to use this data, does it mean that I have to contact the legal person each time I need to use it? I think that's probably the questions that we're highlighting about the operational aspect. Yeah? And in terms of DG, data governance as well, I also like to talk about that because I also look into data governance. In my opinion, data governance should be, in fact, the center of all of this, more so for a financial institution than others. Because if we just take one sample, single version of truth for a customer, and customer can come from many different places. And whose role is it to ensure that there is a standard that this field must be in this format, and that whose role is it to set that the ownership of this data set, that data that come from this channel, you need to make sure that it's of good quality, and this is the standard that I set. That should be the role of data governance to moderate, because whilst they themselves don't know what standard should be set, they will be reaching out to the users who will then be using the same data sets. And that's the role of data governance, to be the collaborative platform for the users as well as the responsible data owners to agree on what standard they should follow.
Okay. And again, we have around 5 minutes, and I want to go to a topic quickly on data sources. But if there's, again, if anybody has any questions, please do send in. More than happy to take it up on the Q&A window. But I'd like to go to a topic because today's topic is about data sources and harmonizing different data sources. We are all assuming those data sources are structured data sources. But what about unstructured data sources, which is becoming more and more important? Garrett, from AI perspective, you'll be dealing with a lot of unstructured data sources. How are you actually harmonizing? Are we ready to harmonize?
Yeah, so okay, so the structured data source are the easy part, right? Like, you know, they are structured, they are fine, you know, a good definition will, you know, point you into the right direction. But for unstructured data set, so unstructured data set, like, you know, assuming like a video conversations or like, you know, between the call centers, like those like audio logs, right? So how do we, you know, harmonize this like unstructured data and keep it in a format that it will be useful for the business to glean the insights? So the way I see it, you know, I've worked with a previous like a banking industry whereby, you know, they are looking into analyzing the call logs from the call centers and to, you know, how to, you know, efficiently assign the call agents, you know, to the different requests by analyzing these call logs. And they would like to, you know, store these like a call logs from the user, the communication between the user and the call agents, right? So definitely it is not an easy task to, you know, store this unstructured conversation. So first of all, like, you know, as again, you know, we talk about like a data governance since we talk about that. So during the call between the customer and the agent, we need to filter out any personal information again, like, you know, because in a call center, the call agent might ask you for your personal information, like your NRIC, your birth date, you know, or even your PIN, like, you know, T-PIN, right? Or you can hear on the phone, but, you know, in the call itself, it might contain sensitive information. So first, like, you know, these audio call logs should be stored in a place whereby it is in compliance with the in-country regulations, whereby, you know, how are the customers' personal information stored? So you have to treat this data as personal customer information, right? Then secondly, how do you, you know, use like run the AI or the machine learning algorithms to make sure that you identify these are potential, you know, personal information from these call logs, right? So, well, I can say that, you know, from my experience, by using like, you know, some of the open source tools out there, there aren't many tools that can, you know, identify personal information from call logs with like, you know, satisfactory accuracy. I would say that it is still, you know, we are still fairly quite behind, you know, unless it is for a certain type of language, like, you know, the Chinese and the English or some other languages, which it is quite stable. So removing the personal information from the call logs, you know, to store them is also quite key. Then third, how do we, you know, then after we identify, you know, all this personal information, how do we, you know, put them into a structured format? So that again, you know, I have to align with the domain, like, you know, what is the purpose of storing this unstructured data? Do we store this unstructured data because we want to look at how do we assign the, you know, the best agents for the service? Or, you know, do we want to look at these call logs to, you know, identify who are the happy customers, who are the customers who are dissatisfied? So once we identify the objective, then we can use the machine learning tools to specifically look for the, you know, the structured information within this unstructured data. Then we can store them.
Okay, thanks, Garrett. And does anybody else have an opinion based on what just Garrett has shared? Just wanting to know.
Yeah, just add on that. I think that unstructured are getting more important, but I agree with Garrett. I think it's today in terms of application still in the early stage. I think the challenges are still on the sometimes is the technologies, right? As Garrett mentioned, Chinese English for the voice recognition is maybe high accuracy, but for Vietnam or Thai, right, the accuracy level is not really to meet our expectation. Second, even for OCR, right, to extract the data from the image files, yeah, for this print version, yeah, it's easier, 99, whatever, 90% plus, but its handwriting is very hard. Typically, the signature or the information from the clinic doctors, right? You for human being cannot identify what that means. So a lot of challenges really the technology side. So as a company, it's very hard to build this kind of internal capability. So that's why we want to leverage some of the these are big giant, right? Whatever Google or Microsoft, or those, they can come up the best-in-class solution, so that for enable our industry to leverage that and really to customize for our industry. So I think it's important. I think it's to us, it's still in the early stage for try. Yeah.
Thank you, Dr. Yao. And we have come to the end of our discussion. So first of all, I'd like to thank all our panelists for participating and sharing their insights. I really liked the lively discussion, and I hope we could have had another 30 minutes where we can continue discussing on the various aspects. But at this time, I would like to hand over to Jonathan Bigelow, who will give us the closing remarks. Meanwhile, thank you guys for coming.
Okay, thank you very much, Winston. I really appreciated all the participation from the panelists. Got some great insight on data. We're all learning about it still. We're actioning it. We're finding some is allowing us to come up with new products. We just had a discussion on the healthcare and pharma space yesterday. It was incredible. Some of the new products are coming up with all the data that they're analyzing. Anyhow, I did want to very much thank our enabling sponsor, Denodo, and also Informatica for being an integral part of the program as well. It was very important for us to work with some of the vendor community to make sure we could put this program together. Appreciated having our Digi-Live Summit with the support of our live music. They don't have a lot of places to play these days, so I hope you appreciated that in between. We find, you know, if you just go 2 hours, 2.5 hours straight with no interlude, you know, sometimes it gets a bit taxing just looking at Zoom all the time. So we also have two other things to ask of you, and that is when you're logging out, there is a survey, and we'd like you to fill in those questions. I think there's only 4 or 5 questions. We really need your feedback so that we can do more of these and do them better. There's a lot out there right now, so we are trying to keep it interesting, having end users from different industries discussing what they're doing, different topics. And the other thing I would ask you to do as well, I think it's in the chat function now, is that we do have an additional event coming up. Our next Digi-Live Summit, there you go, is on January 21. And it's how data and cloud are changing business fundamentals. We really look forward to having some of you join. If you did enjoy it, and if you have other colleagues who might benefit from some of the content here, please do send the link and do send the information to them as well. Now, without further ado, I know that we've had you on the call for about 2 hours. I would like to thank you all very much. Again, thank our sponsors, Denodo Informatica, and I look forward to seeing you next time. Goodbye, everyone.
Thanks and bye.